Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and you saw this week that Eric Garner, a man in Staten Island, New York, was harassed and eventually taken down by the police and put into this chokehold that led to him losing his life. The community's outraged, as they should be. I know that I was outraged when I saw this video, and so I immediately had the opportunity to talk to who I think is probably the leading sort of expert that we should talk about in these situations, Mr. Ken Williams. Ken Williams runs a company. I want to say it's K. Will and Associates, but he's going to tell you the name exactly because I didn't write it down. But Ken is a retired police officer. He's been on the force for 20 years, but he's also an advocate for the community. So he understands everything very clearly from the officer's point of view as well as from the community's point of view. And he's very good at providing these sorts of insights. So first I want to ask Ken, how you doing today, brother?
Good, good. How you doing, Doctor? Thank you for having me.
No problem. And just so I can make sure I get this right, is your company called K. Will and Associates? Is that correct?
KWillServices.com.
KWillServices.com. Okay, sorry about that. I didn't mean to get that wrong. Now, you reached out to me right after you saw this video because this video, the first one, of him being I would say harassed by the police, or at least he felt like he was being harassed, and then eventually he was taken down. What bothered you about that initial video?
The initial video is kind of disturbing to me for a number of reasons. When the gentleman is trying to explain to police that he actually broke up a fight, and what they witnessed or what they believed in their perception to be him selling a cigarette, which could or may not be the accurate assessment of what occurred. But let's say, for instance, we'll give the police the benefit of doubt and say that they actually witnessed him give somebody a cigarette. That doesn't constitute a crime because every day in America, someone walks up to another person and says, "Can I have a cigarette?" And, some people are very accommodating and they say, "Sure, here you go." Now, in this particular gentleman's situation, he does have a history of prior arrests for selling cigarettes to people who wanted to buy cigarettes without having to pay the taxes. So the police, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they have that history. However, in order to conduct an investigation into any sale, in this particular case, the sale of a cigarette, not only would you have to approach the person who you believe is selling a counterfeit item, you would also have to approach the person who was the purchaser of the cigarette to engage them to have enough information to know that there was a consummation of the deal for the purchase of something illegal. And I'm not sure in this particular case if that occurred. We don't have enough information today to know if the police might have operated a sting operation on him and had someone approach him and purchase a cigarette from him, and now they have that information at bay. That's a possibility. So when we move forward and we look at the arrest, let's again give the police the benefit of doubt and say they did have probable cause to make an arrest. Now we move into the realm of the arrest where he says, I don't want to, I'm being harassed. You've always harassed me, to one of the officers. You know me, and I'm not standing up. I'm basically letting you know today I'm upset that you're harassing me again. That's what Mr. Garner's statement is to the police. And there's nothing criminal in that statement because he is capable, as any other citizen is capable, of expressing their views, freedom of speech. He's not under arrest. He's being placed under arrest. When he does have police move in to place him under arrest after he uses his free speech, his hands go up. And there's an officer that approaches him from the backside that then puts him into a chokehold. Now, this is where it starts to become very, very problematic for the police. In order to use a chokehold, it's considered deadly force by the U.S. Supreme Court. Because the chokehold, once you cut off the carotid blood flow of oxygen and blood to the brain is the computer that controls the heart. The brain also controls every bodily function in the body. And it's well established that within 10 seconds of cutting off blood flow to the brain, that a person is capable within a minute of actually becoming succumbing to death because there's no oxygen and blood flow going to the brain. Now, in this particular case, when I watched the first video, the officer, based on the video I watched, cut off the blood flow, oxygen flow through the chokehold for nearly 40 seconds. The U.S. Supreme Court has already said within 10 seconds to a minute, death can occur. So this is deadly force that's being applied on a person that has his hands raised. The officer that's in front grabs his wrist. The officer in front isn't defending himself by punching him. He's actually put a hand on his chest. He has his wrist from his hands being raised. The officer in the back that has the chokehold, because now he's on his back, pulls him to the ground. And in that instant, there becomes a switch that has to go and occur here. If a person's being choked and they're being suffocated, their body, their natural response is going to be, hey, could you let that go because I'm choking? They're not going to just say, I'm going to lay here limp and not do anything. So there's going to be some rolling. But in this particular case, Mr. Garner never takes his fist. He never clenches his fist, and he never punches back. When he's on the ground, his hands are fully extended into the universal sign of, I give up. I'm still giving up. Can you please let my neck go? And then he says verbally, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. That is where the police have a fundamental problem, because they are applying deadly force for the sale of a 50-cent cigarette.
Interesting. Wow. Well, you know, that was the first thing that came to mind for me. Is I thought to myself, I said, okay, this man is not, he's not being approached because he raped somebody, murdered somebody, shot somebody, might kill somebody, might harm another person. He was selling untaxed cigarettes. I mean, you know, so he's taking a few dollars out of the pocket of the government to sell cigarettes that aren't being taxed. Why in the world would we ever even conclude that a person should be not just harassed by the police, but to be put in that kind of situation? I mean, it just seems to me that these interactions are what open the door to these unfortunate outcomes. That, you know, as an African American male, you're just so much more likely to just even encounter the police on any level, even for something small. And the problem with that is that once that interaction begins, that's when it can turn into something big. That's when you're at risk of being accused of assaulting an officer or resisting arrest or all these other crimes they can stack on top of things. And nobody believes our story when we go to the police and later on and say, no, that isn't what happened. I didn't assault the officer. He assaulted me. You know, I remember a few years ago, and then this will lead to a question, but I remember a few years ago when we tried to support a woman in Missouri by the name of Heather Ellis, and she was facing 15 years in prison. She's a straight-A student, daughter of a pastor, no criminal record, was facing 15 years in prison because she had cut in line at a Walmart, which led to an interaction with police, and she could have lost everything. And I remember one interesting thing was that when she walked out the door, the police were following her, and the surveillance video saw this. And when she got outside, this is what she told me. There was evidence supporting this based on the blood on her jacket or whatever. She said the cops then tackled her, and you know, and hurt her. And the interesting thing was that she was being charged with assaulting police because it was the officer's word against hers. And we even tried to go to Walmart to get surveillance video in the parking lot. We said, you're Walmart. We know you watch your stuff. You have videos out there in the parking lot. And Walmart came back and said, well, we can't find the video. We don't know what happened, right? So anyway, so this I think this story, the reason I brought it up is because I think it exemplifies the lies and the trickery that's consistently being thrust upon people of color. You know, it's very difficult for any man, especially a poor black man with a criminal record, to convince anybody, especially white jurors or an administration that's controlled and run by our oppressors. Let's just say that. It's hard to convince them that our word is just as valuable as theirs, because they're always going to walk away with this assumption that cops don't lie, that but yet we lie all the time, and it's so unfortunate. And so I want to ask you this too. Now, the police, were they there because of the cigarette thing, or were they there for something else? Has that even been brought up or revealed yet?
Well, let me just add one piece to something that you just brought up, which is that the benefit of doubt that's given to police, and who is going to be believed over another person. As a police function, as a former law enforcement officer, outside of a courtroom, inside reports. Inside a courtroom, inside police reports, the four corners of a police report, those are going to be documents that are sworn testimony, basically. You can't have a false statement in sworn testimony. Outside of a courthouse, inside the streets, during interrogations, police can lie. If I were working a prostitution ring on a corner, and I drive up in a car and I solicit a person that I perceive to be a prostitute on a corner under a guise of a police operation, and the person gets in my car and says, "Are you 5-0?" I'm not going to say to the person, "Yes, I am." See? So it's going to be fundamental that police, during their operations of gathering information, speaking with citizens, it's common for police officers under certain conditions to simply lie. The lie can't be something that transposes itself into a police report. It can't bring itself into courtroom testimony where it's sworn testimony under oath, under the pains and penalties of perjury. So I just wanted to bring up the fact that police officers do often lie, but they're not supposed to lie in the judicial arena at all, or their sworn testimony, or their police reports.
Yeah, I think I'll let you finish your response on it, but it's funny because my dad was a cop for 25 years, and this is why I'm always adamant about getting both sides of the story in any situation, because I don't believe all cops are bad. But I remember once I got lied to by an officer, in something where I had an interaction with the cops, and I said, "Well, how can he just tell me something that's not true?" And that's what my dad said, exactly what you said. He said, "Cops lie," and it was that simple. Well, please continue.
Now, in terms of Mr. Garner, he's on a street corner, and he has the police officers on a public street corner approach him and say, "Hey, we just saw you sell a cigarette to somebody." Was that the lie, or was that the truth? We don't have enough information right now to understand from the police perspective whether or not that was just a ruse. Because it very well could have been a ruse, and Mr. Garner could have reached into his pocket and said, "Hey, officer, you got me again. Here go the cigarettes I'm selling illegally. Ha, you got me. My hands are up. Place me under arrest. Take me to jail." He didn't do that, though. Mr. Garner was adamant that, "Hey, I just broke up a fight. Here goes some witnesses that are public citizens if you want to talk to them. And there's a person that has the cell phone that says, 'Hey, he just broke up a fight. He's not selling any cigarettes.'" So there are two different versions of a story that are unfolding before he's placed in custody. What is not in dispute is that Mr. Garner, when he's being placed into custody, he's not resisting arrest. He's not combative where he's fighting police. He is telling police that he cannot breathe. And then Mr. Garner perishes, based on the fact that police have seized him and controlled him. He perishes in their arms. And then after he succumbs to being seized by police, there's a second video that we've discussed where for 7 or so minutes, no one renders CPR, no one breaks out an AED machine to revive him. If his heart stopped because the computer, the brain, has been temporarily disabled due to a lack of blood flow and oxygen, everything can be revived in the body by simply performing CPR, which every officer is trained to do. And one of the departmental policies that's out there that dictates whether or not when police officers transition from, being the enforcer to now becoming the community caretaker under EMS, they have to make sure that they look at the scene. Is the scene safe? In this particular case, there were no riots out there when Mr. Garner was on the ground. There was ample amount of police officers around to control other individuals. Nobody was being unruly during this episode. In fact, everybody was quite calm, saying that the police were doing a certain job that they didn't agree with, but they were standing at bay, watching and monitoring with their cell phone. The next step is the officer too physically exhausted to perform CPR or continue a CPR reviving, life-saving feature? No one ever performed CPR, so we don't even have to cross that bridge right now. Is the officer being relieved by someone of a higher or same authority or medical authority to continue with CPR? In the second video, we have EMS show up, who is equipped with AED, specialized training, specialized skill, and unlike what normally happens, and this is shocking to me because in the black community, EMS must respond differently to black people than it does to white people, because the urgency to look at Mr. Garner's situation, check his pulse, check his carotid to go and make sure that he has a pulse, that he's breathing. Mr. Garner's eyes are open. His chest is not rising and falling in the video. The EMS officer turns to the police officers and says, basically, I'll go along with the charade and say that he's breathing to help protect everybody here. And then officers, like a sack of potatoes, put him on a stretcher without giving still any life-saving features or life-saving steps to help revive him. It makes one wonder, how is New York City going to counter this when you have 10 plus officers standing around a person that could have been saved, revived? You have EMS that shows up maybe 5 or 6 minutes later, doesn't perform any life-saving features, but then adopts the philosophical belief of the police, which is, let's go along and say, because we got video cameras going, he's breathing.
Wow. Well, it's interesting, when you look into Mr. Garner's interactions with police in the past. One thing I noticed was that that he's had a contentious relationship with the cops, not because he's a violent criminal, but because of this whole cigarette thing, which I don't think is that big of a deal. But it's interesting because he's fought with the police in terms, not physically, but in 2007 he actually filed a handwritten complaint after an officer did a cavity search on him in plain view of people walking by right there out in public, which is incredibly dehumanizing. And also the legal aid people have actually said that he's really wanted to take all of his cases to trial, because he feels that he has been a victim of harassment, and I think this video really justifies that. Now, I want to ask you this: what are the next steps on this in terms of what we should reasonably expect as an adequate punishment, and also not just a punishment for the officers involved, but also a way to kind of rectify this situation, or so that this doesn't happen again, because we know that there's another Eric Garner right around the corner that the police are waiting to kill. Not to say that they get up every morning with a death wish. I don't believe officers get up wanting to kill anybody or hurt anybody, but I do think that there is a fundamental disrespect for black life, particularly black male life, that leads them to do things that they wouldn't do with other people. So what do you think of the next steps? If you're the police commissioner in New York, what are some things you would do? And also, if you're part of that jury that's going to decide what's going to happen in the court of law, what would you say then?
There are a couple of things I want to address. and I'm going to get to every point that you just raised. There were black officers that were present on scene at some point in time while Mr. Garner lay on the ground, while he lay, he wasn't moving. He was, clearly in need of help. Those black officers did nothing. Now, I'm gonna say it as direct as I can. If that had been Upper Manhattan, and if that had been the police response to, let's say, several black officers who were taking a white corporate exec into police custody for selling a cigarette to some other citizen that they thought they perceived was an illegal transaction, do we think the same sort of response, the same sort of EMS response, the same sort of police response would have been similar? If anyone does believe that would be the case, then I'm going to tell you I got a bridge to sell you for a cool $1 million. Okay. So the black community needs to look at the fact that we have technology. It was bright, sunny day. It was on a public street corner, and many citizens witnessed the death of another citizen at the hands of people who are supposed to protect and serve. So that is perplexing to me, because at the end of the day, when Mr. Garner was finally put on the stretcher and whisked away, the community basically went back to doing what it normally does, people walking the street, just another episode of a black man killed on the street corner, sending the the street sweepers, and let's just clean the streets and let's move on, carry on, no biggie. Black life is just as important as white life.
Absolutely.
And a group of citizens that act like a mob and kill another citizen and commit homicide, it's still homicide. So the black officers, the white officers, the officers, period, that were there didn't stop maybe what was a crime in progress between police and Mr. Garner. After the crime was committed, still did not do anything to intervene, which is shocking to me. Nobody stepped forward to put on some rubber gloves, break out a CPR mask, and start doing chest compressions and throwing some breaths into this body to help try to keep someone who was important to someone else in society alive, or at least attempt to keep them alive. No one tried to do that. In fact, police kept him handcuffed, hands around his back, handcuffed on the ground, while people are standing there telling the police with video cameras in hand, I got you, I'm taping you, do something to save this man's life. No one does anything, except try to go and portray a story that they could sell later on to a jury, which is, hey, Mr. Garner, don't worry about it, you'll be fine. When in fact he was dead. Wow. Everybody that was there should be fired.
Wow. Every
person that is there is going to have a hard time with that cell phone video evidence trying to convince a jury that what they did was reasonable, what they did was caring, and what they did was to protect and serve. The video is a eyewitness that is not biased. It is just filming what is occurring at that very moment. It's not a snapshot. It's giving everyone a basic totality of what occurred with Mr. Garner's situation, which is something that usually in this very day and age still doesn't quite happen. We've got the totality of Mr. Garner's situation with his interaction between he and the police all the way to his death. How can the police justify the use of deadly force for the sale of a 50-cent cigarette? It's unreasonable.
Absolutely. And I even wonder, even beyond being fired, shouldn't someone, do you think someone should go to prison for this?
Someone should be prosecuted.
It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. It does go back to what you were saying about this sort of just being a fundamental disrespect for the value of black life. This is somebody's husband, father. He's got 6 children depending on him. and he wasn't doing anything to hurt anybody when he did this. We can't say that selling an untaxed cigarette it makes you a law-abiding citizen. Okay, whatever, but do you deserve to die? Do you deserve to even if he hadn't died? I mean, do you deserve to have someone put their arms around you, slam you to the ground, bust your head, humiliate you in public? I would say the answer is no, and I think it shows that we need some fundamental shifts, not just in the way policing is done within the NYPD, but really across the country. We have to address this idea that when you go around the world and people look at the United States from the outside in, they see everything that we still can't see as a society. They see that they literally, there are so many countries where heinous atrocities are committed, including even Nazi Germany, where they've all said, you're condemning us for what we've done to other people, but do you look at yourselves in the way you treat black people? Do you look at how many black people you have killed over the years, government-sanctioned murders? You've had presidents who were members of the Ku Klux Klan. You have so many black people filling up the prisons that you don't have anywhere to put them. You put them in these concentration camps, destroying their lives, destroying them in every single way. What you do with them on the street, shooting them, in police custody. I mean, it's an absolute outrage, and it's just so interesting that we haven't learned how to become outraged enough, because even we as black people don't respect our humanity enough to believe that it's worth fighting for. We can look at a black man. I've seen so many black men who can watch another black man die unjustly, and they can feel like it's okay because, well, he is just another black man, and it's okay for black men to die. And so even that elitism that you talk about, if this had happened on, say, the Upper West Side or in some affluent neighborhood, and you're talking about some white corporate executive, it's not even conceivable to imagine this scenario. You can't even imagine them approaching him for selling a 50-cent cigarette, let alone everything that happened after that. So I think when you put it in that context, that really, I think, clearly illustrates the racial disparity here, and the fact that we can't be silent about this, and unfortunately people are not. So I'm going to let you get the last word, my friend. Did you have anything else to add?
All I want to add is that we can't have two nations. We can't have an us versus them mentality. It's good versus bad. And if everyone, if in a, how can I say it? If in society we could strip race out of the mixture of decision making and just look at it good versus bad, that would be great. That would be ideal. But we have to understand and be realistic about this, that since the beginning of time in America, race has been a fundamental issue that has been presented by other people. White people have used race to oppress black people. White people have used race to engineer how to become profitable off of black people. White people have taken laws and they have enacted laws to protect themselves and enacted laws that harmed others that were not white people. So in essence, when we look at the several hundred years and we look at how, law enforcement, this idea of protecting and serving has been playing out, black people have not been protected or served very well. The only time that black people will be protected and served better is when we start speaking up about these type of issues and not ignoring them. The no snitch rule that is out there was a no snitch rule about, slavery, a no snitch rule about injustice. Now it's a no snitch rule about the inequality of the drug war that has been waged against black people since 1972, where 200,000 people might have been imprisoned, to now it's reached 30 million people since 1972 have been imprisoned for small minor crimes that they shouldn't be there for. So it is not a war against white and black people, the war on drugs. It's a war against black people, immigrants, people of color, the poor, the impoverished. It's not a war against the middle class, because these police tactics would never happen in a middle class neighborhood or an upper class neighborhood. They're strictly reserved for a poor, black, impoverished neighborhood. That's what I see.
Well, I think you describe accurately something that an officer I respect told me in confidence as well. He said our job is not to protect and serve everybody. It is to protect the rich from the poor, and that's pretty much what we do. Well, I want to say thank you so much, Ken. As always, you provided the kind of insight that really people aren't going to get this anywhere else. You do your homework. You're very thorough. You're very balanced, and you provide just amazing information. So I want to say once again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
And for everybody who's watching, I want you to go to his website. The website is kwillservices.com. Is that correct, Ken?
Yes, it is, sir.
Uh,
Thank
kwillservices.com. That's KWILL services.com. And his name is Ken Williams. He is a former police officer from, is it Brockton, Massachusetts, or
you. Brockton.
Brockport? You said Brockport, right?
Brockton.
Brockton, sorry. Brockton, Massachusetts. And he's always happy to share his knowledge with his community, which is why I respect him so much. So until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.